Okay, well, I have not done an interview before, so this is my first official one, so congrats. And thank you again.
Well, absolutely.
So I guess I should probably introduce myself. So my name is Sarah. I'm a self-experimenting coach or companion, I like to say, and in my coaching company, I like to help people be their most authentic selves by experimenting with what might and what might not work for them, by going over what their beliefs, values, stories, narratives, and all that is. And so in my interview series, I really want to help showcase different perspectives of life and the different ways people have found meaning within their own life. And if it resonates, then that's great. So the lovely lady I'm with today, I actually had heard about we have the same trainer at the gym, and he had been telling me for months, like, you gotta meet this girl, you gotta meet this girl, like, she's into manifesting and stuff like that. And so I was like, yeah, okay. And then we met, and I was like, oh, I get it. I get it. So this is the incomparable Miss Paula Swope, among many things, is a Kentucky native, a philanthropist, an author, a speaker, a coach. So why don't you kind of tell me who you are before I just brag all day long? I will.
Well, so let's see. I was in fundraising for many, many, many years, and during that time, I raised like $60 million for nonprofits. So I had a remarkable run, right? I mean, and I enjoyed it. I did. I enjoyed it. But I started to feel the burnout from the demands of that business. And I was a grant writer. And so grant writing is a very, very stressful career. I mean, it's not like people just wake up one day and say, oh, I want to be a grant writer. That's not how it happens. Somebody in the workplace figures out that you're good at it, and the next thing you know, you're writing those grants. And so I happened to be good at it. And so I had a long, fruitful career at working with nonprofits. But again, started feeling the burnout. The demands are just unrealistic, and it will keep you awake at night. And the stress just really got to be too much. And so what I really wanted to always do is I wanted to be an author, because I loved to write and I loved to help people. And it's like I couldn't figure out how to combine those two things, to make a living. And so the grant writing fulfilled that. But grant writing is technical writing, and you can't be that creative, and you kind of got to beat to a drum, and it's very rigid and blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's just like all day, it's like bureaucratic red tape. That's what you're doing. And so that piece of the work just didn't motivate me anymore. And so I decided to take a huge leap of faith, and I resigned from that career, as I have done so many times in my past, in May of 2021. And so that's when I started this business that I have now. And I have written, of course, we're going to get to this stuff in the interview, but at this point, I have written a couple of books. We'll talk more about that later. And I'm just dabbling in what I love to do and letting that just trickle down and, help other people. And so where I stand right now, and my business is still not fully branded, and not to sound cliche, but it's like, you've heard the saying, you're flying the plane as you're building it, and that's basically what I'm doing. But I'm learning a whole lot through that strategy. And so I'm teaching meditation. I have designed tons of programs and services just based off of those books. And so I'm just kind of finding my way into this new world, and it has been quite the journey.
And there's so much from what you just said that I'm like, oh, there's like another question that I could, because I'd love to talk about like meditation and stuff if we have the time.
Oh, yeah.
Also, I should mention that I will be looking off a script because this is my first interview.
Well,
and,
I mean, I'll pay attention.
yeah, and plus we're Midwesterners, Southerners, so if I don't, then we will never
Just
get through this
way,
interview.
Yeah, get way off track. Yeah.
It'll never happen. So thank you for your introduction, though. That's
Yeah, sure.
lovely. You're really captivating when you speak. I was like thinking of that when we were talking in the kitchen too. I was like, wow.
Oh, thank you.
I'm not one to give out compliments just because I'm like, I'm gonna gas you up real quick. So you had called yourself a former conformer, and I would like to know, what are you referring to with that, and how would you describe yourself before your spiritual awakening, and what was your life like before you started living on purpose and using the law of attraction?
So I'll kick this off by saying I wasn't raised in poverty, but I was raised by two people that were raised in poverty. And I grew up in a rural area, and just geographically speaking, it's like in this area, the moment that you come into the world, you're at a disadvantage because property is just rampant, And certain belief systems accompany poverty. And I call this the poverty invaded mindset. And I inherited that from my parents. I adopted their belief systems, and there is one thing that all people with a poverty invaded mindset have. They expect defeat. That's the one thing that people that have been touched by poverty, whether directly or indirectly like me, that's what they have in common. They expect defeat. And there's actually empirical data to back up that claim I just made. So I can remember being ruled by that expectation of defeat as early on as elementary school, okay? And now what that does to a person is it causes them to live in fear. Like, for instance, I remember being just worried out of my mind when I would take a field trip in school, just anticipating what horrible thing could happen. While all my peers were just excited and having a great time, and there I sat just worried to death. And so I carried that expectation of defeat with me from childhood on into adulthood. And the field trip thing is a tiny, very tiny example, but it's a great one because it illustrates how fear was already living comfortably in my subconscious and controlling my behaviors. I didn't freaking know it. I didn't understand it and realize it. And so this expectation of defeat just spiraled into every aspect of my existence. And it's like I was taught that money is really hard to come by and that men are the only ones that are capable of making large amounts of money. So by the time that I was a teenager, I believed that I was going to have to work in any job that I could find, whether I liked it or not, and that I needed to bow down to that employer and do whatever I had to do to just keep that job. And I'm a person that don't fence me in. If you stick me behind a desk and tell me that I've got to stay there from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., I'm going to have like the motivational levels of a person on death row. It's not happening with someone like myself. And so everything that I was taught to believe went against who I truly am. And I was taught to believe that all men cheat and that men are abusive to their spouses. I believe that I had to tell outrageous lies to just be interesting to other people. And so that just started a whole other, chain of self-sabotaging behaviors. And I suffered from it. And I can keep going on and on and on about these belief systems, but the reason I'm including all this into this question because it is heavily tied to this former conformer thing. So these belief systems led to toxic relationships. One right after another. It's almost like if there was a narcissistic asshole within a 50-mile radius, get me. I'm here. I want this karmic contract with you. It led to financial problems, really low self-esteem, humiliation, trauma, and this acceptance of abuse. You know, that was my norm. Obesity, high blood pressure, regret, guilt, hatred, jealousy, binge drinking, resentment. I mean, that was my life, and I had this burning desire, and I wanted to like get revenge, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so before my awakening, my life just wasn't worth living. It sucked. I mean, I cried a lot, I complained a lot, I looked as bad as I felt, and it was just like like this string of chaotic events that would just start every single day, like the moment I would open my eyes, you know. And so young Paula thought that she was a victim. I was completely controlled by my parents, but I refused to take responsibility for myself. Nobody ever taught me that. So that was before my awakening. So after my awakening, I realized that I wasn't raised to really be self-reliant. I was raised to believe that I wasn't capable of being self-reliant. So that's where I adopted, well, I can't. Anytime anybody would mention an opportunity or I would think about something I really wanted to do, first thought, I can't. So my father is a true self-made millionaire, and the fact that he's accomplished what he has accomplished is miraculous, because he beat the deepest poverty that, I mean, anybody could possibly imagine, and I'm very proud of him for doing that, and I give him full credit for that. However, he only beat it monetarily speaking. He didn't beat the fear, and he repeated patterns of abuse because that's all he knew. So all of that trickled down to me, and controlling people was one of his preferred methods of abuse, and I was at the very top of that list, and I was totally dependent on him for all of my resources. It's like he was my puppet master, and he enjoyed controlling me. He enjoyed it. He threatened to take my car away all the time. He threatened to cut off my health insurance all the time. I mean, it was just something all the time. And I gave him exactly what he wanted. I cried and I begged because I truly believed I was powerless. I was conforming. So it was my norm to wake up in the mornings and to these scathing voicemails from him. And so I was in fight or flight mode like the moment that I woke up. And this went on and on and on. I mean, for years. And so all I was doing was I was conforming to everything that I was expected to do. And so when I broke out of all of that, I stopped conforming. And so that's why I call myself a former conformer. Because anytime that we go against who we truly are, then we're conforming to what somebody else wants us to be. And at about 29 years old, I said, no, no. And that's when everything took a turn.
Oh, I loved all of that. Oh, I guess I'm just going to have to keep saying that, but thank you for sharing.
Oh, yeah.
There's so many interesting points that you made. Like, one, how an event that happened, like, how old were you during that field trip?
I can remember going on a field trip like in the 3rd grade.
So like
about 8 or 9.
And you were already in that mentality of fear.
Oh yeah.
Things.
Oh yeah.
It's interesting when we start asking people, like, when do you think that belief developed? And even you saying, like, I don't think that's who I truly was. I just think I adopted these beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And even like you recognizing like how they came to be in your life is just remarkable. Wow. All right. Before I get on my tangent, speaking of which, so you are 46 now, and you had said you were about 29 when you really started to commit to becoming spiritually enlightened. So I have a few questions in here, and I can always double back if you need me to. But before we talk, like how your spiritual journey like really, really started, I want to touch on the fact that you had spent decades creating these narratives and perceptions of yourself, like you had said, the world and other people. that weren't really the most empowering, and left you in a lack and stuck kind of mindset. And so I'm curious to know, what was the breaking point, and what, like, the point where you basically said, like, enough is enough, like, I can't do this. And really, I guess, what was, like, the catalyst where you really, that kind of kicked it off?
Well, so before I answer this question, I want to play something for you. And I'm going to give you a little bit of background before I play this. So, I mean, unfortunately, I had to sever ties with my dad and his son. And I have not had any contact with them since July 2015. Okay? And, I mean, I was married in October 2015 for the first time in my life. No word from Dad. My parents are divorced, and they have been divorced since I was 18, but my mother almost died in December of 2017 and had to have open heart surgery, and no word from Dad. No word from him during any business venture that I took. No word, nothing. I mean, like, so no birthdays, Christmas, holidays, nothing, okay? So I have not heard anything from him in 7.5 years until March the 24th, which was just a few days ago. And at 2:33 p.m., my phone rang, and I looked down, and it was him. And I was getting ready for a coaching client. I had a coaching client at 3 p.m., and it's really important that I'm in the right headspace for that. And so I didn't listen to the voicemail because I knew it was not going to be anything good, okay? So I'm going to play it for you.
Young lady, you just lost your daddy, and you're the most lying bitch that I have ever heard in my damn life. And you're a gold digger from hell, and you always was. So leave me out of your goddamn message. Get stuck, you. And I never said it before, but I don't want you to come see me when I die. Hell with you.
Okay, so I have no idea what set him off. No idea. But that was my norm for so many years. And so it's not like there was necessarily one breaking point. That's like a metaphor for all of it, because that was just my norm. And so, and I don't really, I mean, that's just, I mean, that's his go-to. Well, you're a liar, you know? He just, because he's somebody, I mean, this person raised me. True narcissist, he will treat people horribly, but how dare you talk about it, right? And so when you talk about it, then he goes to, well, you're lying on me. And so I don't know what set him off, because I don't typically talk about him. I don't talk about him on social media. I don't really talk about him at all anymore. But I published a blog post about a month and a half ago or something, and it was called Looks Matter. And I mentioned him briefly because I talked about how really nasty he was to me when I got like really overweight in my early 20s. And I made reference to that. And I'm thinking that somebody must have shown him that or something. I don't know what set him off. But that was my life. Okay? And I got sick of it. Like, I got so sick of it, and I wanted independence so badly that I was willing to just do, anything to get it. And the more that I dug deep into my spiritual practices, the more mindfully aware I became of how my normal wasn't fucking normal at all. No. And so no one ever told me about the law of attraction. Like, the importance of my thoughts, that was never mentioned to me, period. The power was taken away from the individual, and that's why I felt like a sitting duck for the first 3 decades of my life. The moment I became willing to view myself in the world I lived in through a different lens, I mean, things really, really started to change. And I started feeling better right away, really, because for the first time in a long time, I had something to believe in. I had hope, and my way just flat out had not worked. And so I was finally open to try someone else's way. So, I mean, and I wasn't going to publicly share, that voicemail at all. But I thought, you know what? That's the breaking point. It's being, connected to someone like that. And so, and I have come so far, like so far, in the way that I deal with people because of him. And so he's really at the core of that whole breaking point. So. I'm
so sorry.
I mean, but it's like, what is really something is I wasn't even upset by that voicemail. I wasn't even upset by it. Will was upset, my husband, he was upset. My mother was upset. Everybody that heard it was upset. And I passed it along to a few family members because I said, what in the world brought this on? I mean, do you all have any idea what brought this on? I haven't heard anything from him in 7.5 years, and what's triggered this? And nobody seems to have an answer. But I really, truly, from the depths of my soul, was not upset over that. It's like, I just relinquished control over situations like that a long time ago. There's just no need.
Thank you. So much to say. I'm glad you shared it because I think that at least one person will be able to relate to that. And I talk a lot with clients about how I think oftentimes, especially if you experience trauma, like you said, like you either go into victim mode or like you start blaming yourself.
Oh yeah.
And you don't think that there's really much of an alternative. And I think it says a lot that you've gotten yourself to a point of somebody who used to be reactive, like you said. I used to give him what he wanted by like really crying or getting really upset. That you can like kind of sit here today and hear that. And I'm sure there's a moment of being like, oh, this kind of hurts, but it's more just like, but it's just not gonna take my energy from me. That's marvelous.
But it was a test, and I passed it because in the past, when I would get those voicemails, I would behave the same way every time. Like I would shake. I would start shaking, from the inside out, and my face would start burning red, and I would go from, devastation to fear to anger to desperation, and then I would conform. Then I would call him and cry and beg, and and I don't know, what kind of reaction that he expected to get from me, but he clearly underestimates me. He always has. So
I think that's really powerful that you can get to a point where something like that isn't gonna bring you down. Something like that could have brought you down for weeks.
sure, it used to. You know, it used to. And through everything that I've done, I'm just, emotional resilience has been miraculous. You know, everything that I've done, that's really the outcome that changed everything. And I didn't realize that when I first got started. You know, I didn't realize that. It took some, you know, digging deep and researching and educating myself to see what the problem was. I did not have control over my emotions. And people that don't have your best interest at heart can spot that, and they prey on it, and it's like a predator and a prey. And so people like him can spot the weakest link, and they take full advantage of that. And so when that light bulb went off, then, you know, I got a little bit more of my power back, and then I kept moving forward and got more of my power back. And now I'm to the point that it's really, really hard to upset me. Other people can't really do that. Now, when that happened with my dogs, I was heartbroken. You know, I was heartbroken over that.
Yeah.
And but in a couple of days, I was even coming back from that. And that has everything to do with the choices that we make, because we are infinite choice makers. We have free will.
Yeah.
You know, we've got free will, and all this society and pressure to conform, that takes that away from us. And so I got all of that back. But see, people like him never change. And so he has no idea who I even am. And he hasn't really known me in 15 years
Probably
or so.
ever, really.
Ever really? Because I never lied like on him. I never told lies about him because of the lying accusation. But I did lie to him because I felt like I had to.
I mean, you're protecting yourself, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't feel like I could tell him the truth about anything because he scared the daylights out of me. And so, but looking back on it, I see things so clearly.
I guess I have a few questions with that like we haven't written down or anything, but how are you like able to, like, with a situation like that, be able to, one, and I'm sure that there's more to that, but create like get to a point where you can kind of, and I'm sure we'll get more into that, but kind of create that safe space for yourself to recognize that, like, you know, when, whether that's us or others, when people, you know, attack someone, whether verbally, physically, whatever, any opinion that we have of someone else, it's not their fault. Like, you know, we have to own that.
Mm-hmm.
And so how did you get to the point where you were able to see that other people's opinions or actions towards you was more about themselves, one, but how are you able to do that while also giving yourself grace and compassion, while also, like, not getting into this, like, need to have to, like, kind of get, like, analytical and go down the, like, rabbit hole of having to ruminate over it and be like, why did they act this way, or, like, or get into, like, this hate, like, I hate them, like, they're the worst person ever. Like, how are you able to just, like, I guess, like, maintain your own peace in that?
Well, I did that through forgiveness. And I didn't really know what the true meaning of forgiveness was. And Wayne Dyer taught me that, you know. And when he started, you know, when I watched him, you know, teach about forgiveness, I knew what I had to do, because I was raised to believe that, you know, forgiveness is kind of for, you know, the weak. Nobody told me that was for me, you know, and I would hear, you know, in my household a lot, I will never, you know, ever forgive that person, you know. And it's like, if you said you were going to forgive somebody, then you were, you know, labeled as being weak and a sucker or a doormat, you know, or whatever. And so that's another, you know, thing that I had to see through a different lens. I mean, it's like I had to teach myself to think the opposite of how I had always thought and behaved. And so when I learned the true meaning of forgiveness, and Wayne Dyer told me exactly what to do, and I did it, and it worked. Empathy, you know. So monsters create monsters. And so the way that I was able to not only forgive Dad and many people like him that I was involved with, but I put myself in his shoes and thought about everything that he had gone through as a child, because his upbringing was brutal. It was brutal. And so I thought about all of that, and I was able to forgive him. And there was, and it took years, you know, this wasn't done overnight, because I was hard-headed and reluctant and just was not willing to do it at all for the longest time. But then I became open to it, and when I did, there was a vision that I held of Dad, and the vision comes from a story from his childhood, and it's horrible. It's like horrible. And so I held that in my head, you know, even as painful as it was to think about that for me, I was able to possess more love for him through empathy. And that's hard to do when you're dealing with somebody that doesn't give a shit about how you feel. You know, it's a true test. So it took a long time to work through that, but I did. And then I just started behaving that way with everybody, including myself. And then now more recently, I have been studying under Deepak Chopra at the Chopra Center. And he talks about this a lot. And he has taught me that, you know, we are all from the same source, right? I mean, we're all from the same source. And I learned that years ago, but he puts a bit of a different twist on it. He's like, everything you look at is you know. We are the universe, you know, we are the creators. And so if you hate somebody and you refuse to forgive them, it's like fighting with your own hands, right? And so now I'm keenly, you know, mindfully aware of that. And then if someone happens to be rude to me or disrespectful, which is very rare in this day and time, but if that happens, I don't go into fight or flight mode. I don't go into attack mode. I don't react. I think, wonder what happened to them. Because it doesn't have anything to do with me. So I just, again, I had to think the opposite of how I had thought. And it wasn't easy. And I felt like a fraud for the longest time, and I felt like I wasn't getting anywhere. But then one day I woke up and I believed everything that I had been doing. And it just happened. You know, it just happened. And I knew that I had fully and completely forgiven Dad when I was able to be grateful for him, because he's been my greatest teacher. I mean, I've got a backbone of steel from being in the boxing ring with him for so many years. And so I'm grateful for that. But that doesn't mean that I have to associate.
That's lovely. So many things again. You know, I like that you started it off by saying that you were raised around people who see like kindness or forgiveness as weakness. And I think that that's something I personally think a lot about, is how much people like desperately want community and they crave intimacy, and I don't mean like physical intimacy,
Right.
but and vulnerability, and like we want this safe space. I think we all, like all of our inner children are just like, I just want to play and have fun and love people, but like there is this belief around like that people have that, you know, I made like a video the other day talking about what even is simp culture. Like people make fun of people for loving people too much, and it's like, I understand codependency and being clingy, but like there's nothing wrong with loving people and wanting people around. And I hate that people feel like, because I've heard that from people, like, I'll never do that again, I'll never talk to them again. And it's like I understand if you never want to talk to that person again, because maybe it is at a point where, I heard one time someone say, I learned how to love that person best from a distance. And I do think that is true.
That is true.
In some cases, where even in my own life, there are some people that maybe just, you know, it's like chemical reaction, like by themselves, they're completely safe, but you know, certain things when they get together, it's just an eruption. But I do think that unconditional love just means loving people as as a human, and it doesn't have to extend past that. You don't have to be like, I love everything about this person.
You don't even have to like the person. I mean, and that was like, I mean, I can, you know, totally, you know, love and not like the person and not want to be around somebody. I mean, we're not meant to be around everybody. You know,
it'd be exhausting.
Oh my God. I mean, and everybody is so different. Everybody is so different. And not everybody's all bad, not everybody's all good. My dad's not all bad. There have been extreme acts of kindness throughout the years. But those were not as frequent as his wrath.
Well, and intentionality matters. I mean,
Oh my
you
God,
give great
yes.
gifts, but what's your intention behind it?
Exactly. And there was always a price tag. You know, there was always a price tag with him. And people like him. That's just how they are. And they're not very self-aware, and so they don't realize it. You know, they don't realize it. They don't realize they're the bad guy. They don't get that piece of it. And when you call them out, they just crumble. So everybody's different. And so I have just learned to keep that in mind and not take anything personal ever, because it's not real anyway.
No, it's not.
So, seems like it, but it's really not.
Wow, there's a lot that I can go on that. I'm also trying, I'm like, okay. All right, well, thank you for that. Seriously.
Yeah.
Okay, so speaking of which, I said, so we all have big moments in our lives that lead to a significant change. And I remember during a previous conversation that you had mentioned an event, which at the time may have seemed small, but basically led to a spiritual awakening and how you view yourself in the world. So with that said, could you tell me a little bit about your late 20s and finding Wayne Dyer?
Oh yeah. And I can't say there was like one event that kick-started everything. It was more like a chain of events of just the same old abusive shit. I would meet different people, but they all acted the same and they all treated me the same. And so I was just stuck in this pattern of just bullshit. And when you're raised in a toxic environment and you live in fear for years and years and years, that fear manifests into people, places, and things that you don't want. And so everything about my physical reality was made up of people, places, and things that I did not want. And so if I had to narrow it down to one thing, it was consistently watching other people get what they wanted while I ended up empty-handed 10 times out of 10. And I was very resentful of people who had loving, supportive parents. I mean, and that, you know, because I blamed everyone for my misfortune and misery, and it was Wayne Dyer that finally got through my thick head. You know, it was him. And the truth was that I had created all of it, every stinking ounce of it. And so I took responsibility for everything that I had done to contribute to the shitty life. And that was a big moment for me, because I had very, very little emotional intelligence. You know, growing up with my parents, both of them scared to death. You know, Dad just, you know, was disguised as somebody that wasn't scared of nothing when he's afraid of everything, and hides behind his Rolex watch because he feels like that watch makes him better than everybody in the room. But that is so fleeting and stupid, because someone like that, the moment that somebody comes in and has a better watch, well, that confidence goes and they're on the hunt for something else. And so when you're like that, you are never truly happy, you know? And so it took Wayne Dyer making me realize that before I could break out of that pattern. And the way that I thought and the way that I felt caused me to be jealous, a very jealous person. And that would just eat at me all the time. And about the history of Wayne Dyer, I was thinking about this yesterday, and I really cannot remember the very first book, but it was one of two. It was either The Power of Intention or Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life. And those two books are highly significant, but the most significant piece of this is this quote is in one of those books, and I'm not sure which one, but this quote changed my whole life, okay? This quote right here. When I heard Wayne Dyer say, hostile people live in a hostile world. Peaceful people live in a peaceful world, same world. I was like, holy shit. And that quote stuck with me so hard, because it helped me understand why my life was the way it was for the first time ever. And so it's just like, bam, I got it in that moment. It's like, I got it. And so I started really people watching during that time and noticing the stark differences in their lives. And it caused me to start asking questions that I hadn't asked before. Why is this person sick, or why has this person been sick their entire lives, when you got this person over here who chain smokes and they live to be 105, never sick, right? And why are, you know, people stuck in poverty pockets their entire lives, while Kim Kardashian is over here having her fleet of cars in her private jet painted to match her home. Okay, and so that is like heavily tied into this whole poverty invaded mindset thing, because I realized that I was somebody who expected defeat, but the people in Calabasas, California, well, they expect victory. They expect wealth. I expected scarcity. So we get what we want, and the expectation that we all have for ourselves, that's the reason for these differences. And so learning that from Wayne Dyer led me to, you know, studying all the greats, and they all said the same thing. And I'm like, okay, I think I'm onto something here. And so that's when I really nailed it down and decided who it was that I wanted to be. And I put it on a vision board, and I started acting like that I had all this stuff when I didn't have it, and the acting led to believing, and one day I woke up and the lie had become the truth. And when that lie became the truth, very few people that had been around me were still standing. And I went about it the hard way because I wasn't self-aware, I wasn't mindfully aware, I didn't have control of my emotions. And so it's like I surrendered and the universe handled all of it for me. And it was really harsh. It was really harsh. Felt like the whole world was crumbling at the time, but that had to happen because I hadn't handled things the right way. And a lot of stuff had to be undone. And so I had to go through more hell, to get to where I was supposed to be and get, around the people I was supposed to be around, because the people around me were a huge problem. Huge. But they were just a reflection of how I felt about myself. But I didn't realize that before. I was blaming them. Well, they made me feel this way, they made me blah, 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 blah. When I was right there, hey, I'm here for it, And so, but when I completely, came to terms with everything that had happened, they weren't around anymore. They were gone, and they haven't come back. And those types of people don't show up anymore. They just don't.
I have so much to say. I love the distinction you just made in saying, because you started off kind of saying that like the world is a mirror, and what we see in others is usually just something we see in ourselves. Or you might have brought that up in the last question. I can't remember.
Yeah.
But even you saying, I was looking outward and blaming all these people and these things outside of me, and what I like that you said is, once you change yourself, the scene changed. And so, you weren't so much blaming them. It's like they can be whoever they need to be. But the reason I'm around them was my own choice.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's really powerful too. Because one, it helps you from being that person who's like, it's this other person's fault. It's like, maybe they're not your cup of tea, but like they didn't force you. So I like that distinction, but also with that, there's a question, because I've thought about this a lot, like the past year, in myself in regards to other people, is I think in regards to shame and taking accountability.
Mm-hmm.
I think for so long, people associate shame or accountability, like self-accountability, with shame, because a lot of the times when you're younger, and even in the most healthy childhoods, if you get into school or you meet other people, if you get in trouble at school, say, well, why do you do that? And you're honest with them and you tell them, and you still get punished. So you might slowly but surely realize, like, well, what even is the benefit of being honest? And so I guess my question is, when it comes to, like you said, I had to start taking accountability that I was creating a lot of my misfortune. How were you able to get into the rhythm of doing that without it being this shame? Because I have heard that a lot with like law of attraction and manifesting, where people are like, it sent me into a really bad tailspin and made me hate myself. And I wonder if that's just because the way that they were taking accountability, if it was coming from a place of shame and not a place of like, well, if I know that I got myself here, I know I can get myself out.
The way that I naturally started ditching the self-hate and the self-sabotage, the more my awareness expanded, and I started operating from like a higher level of consciousness. And so it's like I was able to, what's the best way to explain this? Sit back and watch like as an experiencer of my experience. And as kids, we come into the world, and we are brainwashed and messed up before we have a clue what's happened. And that's how I extended kindness to myself. Although I was taking responsibility for not ever taking responsibility, really, I was able to treat myself with kindness because I inherited all that. And my subconscious mind was a freaking landfill you know, by the time I was, again, in elementary school, middle school, and it just kept building and building and building. And I don't see that as necessarily any real fault of my own. It's just like it wasn't my dad's fault that he was born into the situation that he was born into. It wasn't my mom's fault that she was born into the situation that she was born into. And I think that when people are at fault is when they don't catch it and they don't do anything about it. And they continue to pass this along generation after generation after generation until you got a whole family tree that's just full of nothing but hate. And so somebody has got to interrupt that. And I did that. You know, I'm the person in my immediate family that did that. And so that's how I was able to see myself through a different light, because I did blame myself when I first got on this path in a big freaking way. And when I got in on the whole forgiveness piece of the inner work that I did, I was number one on that list. You know, I was the first person that I had to forgive because I was pretty hard on myself. And so, and that just all came along with it. But it was a good thing because I was dealing with all that for the first time ever. And if I hadn't, I wouldn't have been able to clear it out. And then there's another theory that I would like to mention, and I'm not fully educated on this at all. But there's reincarnation. There's past life trauma. And I have been exploring that recently. And so according to an Akashic Records expert or a shadow worker, you know, they're going to say, well, you asked for all of this. You know, you've carried this over from a past life, and you're here to learn these lessons, and you asked for all of that. Now, I'm exploring that theory, and there's parts of it that I do believe. And so if that's the case, then I came into this world and all of that was supposed to happen. And so if it was supposed to happen, then I can't be mad at myself. So, but the part of the whole forgiveness process with me, again, was just seeing myself opposite and everything opposite as I had my whole life, you know, for 3 decades. Because, like, again, my way, it wasn't working, you know. And so that's how I did it.
Wow. Yeah. I like that you were able to basically almost like reparent yourself and allow yourself grace.
I had to. I mean, that's a great way to explain it. I mean, I had to. My parents truly did not understand so many things. And, you know, there was a religious, component to this too. Because I rejected the church at a really young age, which was rare for somebody.
A Kentucky girl.
Right. And I just knew that something wasn't quite right about all of that. The organized religion thing, I couldn't get down with it. I mean, it's like, what the hell are you all talking about? Because I go to one church, to one denomination, and I'm told one thing, and then I go to another denomination, and I'm told another, and then you all make God out to be some white dude that sits up in the sky, sits on high and looks down low, and if I don't behave appropriately, he is going to put the smack down on me, and I'm going to burn in a lake of fire. And I'm like,
that's the opposite of a party.
like, where's all this coming from? And, you know, that was another thing that was drilled into my head that did never fully creep in, because I didn't believe in that. And so now it's like the God that I know and the God that Wayne Dyer introduced me to doesn't harshly punish people. You can live in hell on earth.
Oh, Lord.
And I did. And it's like, it's left up to us. I mean, we've got free will, and everything about my socialization, and I'm not just talking about my parents' beliefs. talking about school teachers, I'm talking about friends, I'm talking about all social institutions. That is how they saw everything. And so, you know, that impacted me, you know. So not to get off on a you know, go down a rabbit hole about the church, but that's tied into all that too.
It's still beliefs and narratives that maybe here, you know, have ingrained beliefs within yourselves that weren't helpful. I don't think you're attacking the church, it's just the way that you were taught.
Yeah.
You know, so, but thank you for that. Seriously, that's, I'm trying to keep myself on track too. So let's see. Oh, so how would you describe yourself when you like were first getting into like at that point when you did meet the breaking point? Like, who were you? Well, I guess like who were you before, and like when that was happening, as well as what was the first thing you realized about yourself when your awareness expanded, and over time, what changes did you notice after like leveling up? How did you behave? How did you carry yourself? And so basically, what's the difference between the 20s Paula and who you are today, and like with you specifically? So
when I first found Wayne Dyer, I was lost, clueless, miserable, angry, disappointed, beaten down, insecure. You know, I had that false sense of self. I felt lonely. I felt like I wasn't supported. I didn't have anybody. I really felt totally alone. And I flat out was not living my life purpose at all. I didn't have a clue what that was. And I was desperate, but my desperation actually ended up being my saving grace, because the desperation is what drove me to make the changes that I made. And I mean, I changed everything. Like, because my desperation caused me to be curious and start asking those questions about the differences in people's lives. And it drove me to be creative and eager to learn as much as I could about creating my physical reality. And so when I found Wayne Dyer, I mean, I traded in my bar stool for spiritual tools, really. Mm-hmm. I mean, my Calvin Kleins would hold down bar stools at various dens of iniquity about town, while I loudly and excessively, to anyone who would listen, I would tell them about how bad my life was. And the only thing that shut me up was blacking out at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And so that's who I was when I stumbled across Wayne Dyer. That's who I was. And there were a lot of layers to me, though, because I was always a straight A student, like always. But I dropped out of high school. When I was my junior year, I dropped out of high school and homeschooled my senior year. Went to college as a non-traditional student at 25 and had a bachelor's and a master's by the time I was 32. And so there were a lot of layers there. I was a different person on campus than I was in my personal life. And so I was in a lot of split thinking, okay? Like a lot of split thinking. And so, but those excellent character traits that I had, well, that was who I truly was. But those were overshadowed by that landfill that was my mind. I mean, my mind was, it was a trash bin. I mean, I allowed anything to infiltrate it, anything. And so I was not self-aware. I didn't realize any of that. I was ignorant, and I self-sabotaged. But something was always like pecking me on my shoulder, you know, kind of saying, Paula, you know, you really don't belong here. You know, you don't belong here. And so when I shut my big, loud, freaking mouth and I was able to listen, that message came through and I paid attention to it, okay? And so that's when I noticed that I had stopped reacting to all those things that had triggered me for so long. And it was coming to that alone within itself was a complete miracle. And so me coming to the conclusion of realizing I flat out was not in the right place at the right time with the right people. I was not where I was supposed to be, okay? That's when I got the big picture and my awareness expanded. And so my temper was notorious. Like, I had a really, really bad temper. And I reacted to, everything. My whole life, it was like sands through the hourglass. It was all day long. It was just this chaotic mess. And that just turned me into being like a narcissistic person's dream. I touched on that a little bit more earlier. Or I meant to say I touched on that earlier. But the people, places, and things that like triggered me my whole life suddenly didn't trigger me anymore. It's just like getting that voicemail the other day. I really wasn't that fazed by that voicemail. And so I lost the desire to react. And Wayne Dyer taught me that it is impossible to argue with someone who has no desire to be right. And so as my awareness expanded, I became that person. I just didn't have a desire to argue and fight with people anymore. I just didn't. And so through the spiritual practices, my emotional intelligence strengthened, and that's what helped me become more self-aware. And awareness is always the first step in this process, always. And so those are the things I realized about myself. And at that point in my life, I was able to do something that I really didn't think was possible, and that was the forgiveness piece of the work. And so, a person who is highly emotionally intelligent is powerful, more powerful than somebody with an Einstein-level IQ, because that's tied to everything, because we can see those people, places, and things with empathy versus judgment. And I used to be a really, really, really judgmental person. I was taught to act like that. And so, when we can possess empathy for someone, like I said earlier, who has done us wrong. We've solved 95% of our problems right there. And so those are the things that, those are the highlights that I realized about myself, from teenage Paula, 20s Paula, up into 30s Paula, and then now, and those same concepts still stand and guide me daily.
Oh, well, we kind of talked about this a little bit, but I'd love to know how you view people and the world, and especially the difference in your perspective of interpersonal relationships and community before awakening and after. And with that, I'd love to know, how did the closest people to you react to the changes you made, and how did you adjust to the changes in the way that people interacted with you after the fact?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. So I'll go back to how people behave that are socialized to live in fear, okay? And so there's a personality trait that comes along with that fear that encourages like a backstabbing kind of culture, all right? And so growing up, the norm was to just talk about everybody behind their backs, and everyone around me was harshly critical of others. And so I adopted that backstabbing way of life by the time I was early on in elementary school. Again, I'd say 7, 8 years old. I was acting like that. And so, and I just thought that was normal. And so this ignorance accompanies the poverty invaded mindset, because people who have that type of mindset don't trust anybody, don't trust anyone. Everybody is out to get them, and there's a hierarchy in life because God blesses some people more than others. So for those who have been, blessed by God, well, I was taught that, well, I needed to be jealous of them and judge them because life's not fair, and I had to just not be chosen for that role. It's ridiculous. So I was socialized to believe that I was superior basically to anyone that was different from me. And so that caused me to be prejudiced and hateful. Okay? And it was kind of odd though, because I remember times when I would behave like that because I felt like I had to, but it's not how I really felt. And that was that whole conforming thing, And so everything was rooted in fear. And so naturally, that's what I attracted to me, okay? So it was just a whole big mess. And so my view of the world it was an unfair place to be, and that's just the way that things were. And there was nothing that I could do about that at all. I was this powerless victim of chance. I was a sitting duck. And so I was just taught to conform, not question authority, because I was at the bottom of this totem pole in life. So all of that tied into my view of the world around me, and I just viewed it as a very unfair place to be. And I viewed it as, well, if I speak my truth and I am who I really want to be, then nobody's going to like me. And so, again, that whole former-conformer thing, comes back into play. So it took a significant amount of time and dedication to doing the inner work to reverse that whole mess. And so, although I knew the way I viewed myself in the world was wrong, it just took years for me to rid my subconscious of those lies, because it would just keep rearing its evil head when I just least expected it. And but when I realized the power that I had, and I took responsibility for everything that had happened to me, my behaviors changed really without even trying. It's not like I went into my spiritual practices or went into meditation saying, okay, I don't want to hate this group of people anymore. It just naturally dissolved the hate without trying. And that's the miraculous thing about learning how to use the law of attraction to work for you versus against you, because it's always in motion, it's always working. And so during that time I stopped catering to the needs of others as much as I had in the past, and I started putting my needs and wants at the forefront of my life, which meant all those energy vampires around me didn't get access to my energy, and they didn't like that. Which leads to the other part of your question. And so they made fun of me for meditating. And I foolishly talked about meditation with the people that I hung around with at that time, and they outright laughed in my face. And certain members of my family did the exact same thing. And they told me, just because, I started putting myself first, and I was meditating, and I was behaving differently, and I wasn't at their beck and call anymore, and I wasn't going to happy hour, which in my bunch was self-destruction hour, which started at 4 or 5 o'clock in the day, and then it was just kind of like an indefinite thing until we all blacked out and almost died, right? So when I started saying no to all that, they told me, my family told me, that I was so stuck up that they could believe that I didn't drown when it rained, because my nose was so far up in the air. It's like they couldn't handle my new attitude or assertiveness at all coming from a woman. Oh, women aren't supposed to act like that. So I was called stuck up. I felt like I was better than them all of a sudden. And so they were just very disrespectful, but really, that's how they had always been, so it wasn't anything new. I don't know why I was surprised by it. But I had just, tolerated that disrespect for so long. Again, it was just my norm. And so that's how the people behaved when I changed. But when I leveled up, I wasn't an energetic match for those people anymore. Not everybody is made to level up with us, and not everybody is there to help us get to the next level. And so in that aspect, my spiritual journey led me to kind of feeling more alone than I ever had. But a lot of people who make this type of transition say the exact same thing. But I got to the point that I finally realized I wasn't alone at all. Like I was seeking my sources for power and truth and everything outside of myself. When I took it within, I realized I wasn't alone at all. I had the most powerful freaking partner in the world. And that was God, universe, the divine, whatever you want to call it. And so when I started acting like the divine would act, well, those people didn't want to be around me anymore. So I didn't really have to do a whole lot. They just fell off. I mean, they got nasty, with a few of them at times. I had an ex-boyfriend that stalked me for years. It got kind of stupid with a few people, but really when those people those toxic people can't get what they want from you, and you're no longer making them feel a certain way, and you are no more like living by your ego, they don't want no part of you. They don't want it. And so the people that are still standing, they truly care about me, and I know that. But there's a handful. I mean, truly a handful of people. And so, and then physical distance. I had to physically remove myself from those people in order to break those karmic contracts and really heal and start a new life for myself. I mean, we are what we eat, but we're also who we associate with. And hanging out with toxic people is just as damaging to our health and well-being as consuming toxic waste and digesting it. And all of this I learned in a relatively short period of time, I guess. I mean, I started doing this at 29, and by the time I was 35, my life did not look the same. Period. Nothing about it looked the same.
I think so much of what you said, and that's what I was going to bring up too. You've spoken both in that answer and the one before about like kind of this duality, and I see that a lot, especially like in my coaching clients, in my own life, and just with people in general. And especially I feel like the more that you like open yourself up more spiritually or in healing, whatever type of arena you want to call it, because I think they're kind of interconnected usually, but you start to kind of see people's masks and who they really are, and them trying to fight it. Like even with you saying, like with your dad, how he would hide behind these materials or money, but deep down inside he was afraid. And I think that's another thing I wanted to bring up, is not only are people, they don't want to forgive, like that's seen as weak, but I think people think that it's weak to admit when you don't know something and when you're afraid. And I think that takes a lot of strength to be like, I am scared right now.
Oh, yes.
But I think it's interesting when you can look at people and you can see like, that's not actually you, like, and maybe that kind of goes into what you were saying about forgiveness, is you can kind of see people and be like that's you, that's how you're acting, and I don't have to stick around you and wait for the authentic person of you to come out, because it might not ever. Right. That's your choice to make, but I don't have to take on your mask as well and think that it was my fault that you put a mask on and decided to behave in a way that is toxic. And there was something I was going to say about that, but it has just left the building. But I do like what you were saying about duality, how there was like this push and pull within you in so many different areas of your life where you knew that there was this authentic part of you, but you felt so compelled to like feed into this like disingenuous version of yourself.
Yeah.
And there was a second thing you had mentioned But that'll have to be brought up again at some point.
Oh, I'm sure it'll come up.
It will.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. After that, so I would like to talk more in depth about present day Paula and how you got from 29-year-old you going through this huge transformation spiritually and healing to being where you are today with your own company, a book on the way, living a life of love, peace, abundance. And so I have a few questions.
Yeah.
How would you describe what living on purpose means to you?
Mm-hmm.
How does it relate to the law of attraction and metaphysics? And to add to that, could you give me a concrete example of a time in your life before you started this living on purpose lifestyle, and maybe even how you felt like you were manifesting what you were experiencing prior to your awakening at 29? And then also a concrete example of how living on purpose has helped you manifest after your awakening and coming into your authenticity. And we can break these all down one at a time. So I'll say, how would you describe what living on purpose means to you currently, and how does it relate to the law of attraction and metaphysics?
So, living on purpose is the absolute opposite of how I used to live, because I used to just live by chance. Okay? And so I'm no longer a sitting duck, because I'm mindfully aware at all times what I'm doing, thinking, saying, feeling. And living on purpose means we deliberately co-create our worlds our way with the universe as our silent partner. And so my thoughts, words, and actions are all strategic, because I know how to make the law of attraction work for me now versus against me. And so living by chance, you risk the law of attraction giving you tons of things that you don't want. And the law of attraction explained, like, in the simplest way possible, is we are what we think we are, right? And so every energy we put out there consistently comes back to us in like kind. It's the law of karma. And so before my spiritual awakening, the energies that I put out in the quantum field were all low energies, you know. I'm just going around day to day like a maniac and spewing hate and wallowing in self-pity. And so if you feel, now I want to clarify something. If you feel jealousy every once in a while, and it's just like a fleeting moment, like I'll see Jennifer Lopez and be like, damn it. You know, damn it. If it's just like a split second, then you're not doing much harm. But if you are overcome by that day in and day out to the point that it turns into hate, but I mean, I think jealousy and hatred are interchangeable terms because it's basically the same thing. And so if you are going around all the time, mad, hateful, resentful, jealous, bitter, seeking revenge, you are in a metric shit ton of shit, because that is going to come back to you in ways that you never, ever thought that it would. And, you know, shame will manifest bad things more than any other energy. And I was absolutely ashamed of so many things. And then that led to a lot of lying about my situation to try and act like everything was okay when it wasn't. And so, I mean, I used to, and this is all tied into living on purpose and the law of attraction, metaphysics, quantum physics. And I used to joke around with people and say, I have been put on this earth to be tormented. And it got a lot of laughs. And so I kept saying that. I said it for years, and I believed it. And so that statement came back to bite me more times than I could possibly imagine.
It's like an order to the universe.
It is. And I couldn't even go to a restaurant without something stupid happening. It was never a pleasant experience, ever. In 1999, my dad sent me on a glorious 6-week trip to Europe. And I went with best friend of mine. And although we were together 24/7 for about 6 weeks doing all the same things, her experience was totally different from mine. Because I went into that trip fearful, worried, expecting worst case scenario. I was convinced my plane was going to crash. And when I got to Europe, chaos. Nobody else's luggage got lost. Mine was lost. I didn't get it for 3 weeks. I got ran over by a bicyclist in Amsterdam. I got to take my pigeons at San Marco Square in Italy. It was one stupid thing after another. And it was funny. I mean, it was funny. But that is just an example of how it will come back to you. And it will come back to you in more serious ways too. Like, I started having urinary issues when I was about 18. Didn't really know what it was. Later on in life, I found out it was interstitial cystitis. And there are studies that show, there's women, that's more common in women than men. And so empirical data show that women, a vast majority of women who have been diagnosed with interstitial cystitis have endured abuse for extended periods of time. And so it's all about, and I know that that's why I developed it. I know it is. And so it's all about this, with the living on purpose and the law of attraction, it's all about being consistency. It's the repetitiveness of thoughts and feelings and behaviors that ultimately manifest out in this big quantum field out here. And so all this stuff, we're putting out there, it creates the physical reality. And so that's where living on purpose comes into play versus living by chance. So the day that I learned about the law of attraction really is the day, it was the first real day of living a life that was worth living. It was totally new to me. I had never, ever heard about that before, ever. And so for the first time in a long time, I was enthusiastic about these opportunities that, I was pulling out, and I took that enthusiasm with me. And I started using the enthusiasm during my envisioning. And I was, deliberately doing that to co-create my world my way. And it was during that time I turned my closet into a meditation space, okay? And every day I would lie down in the floor of that closet and I would spend about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes envisioning the life that I wanted for myself. And the life that I had up here looked nothing like my physical reality at the time. And I got so deep into those visions that I would often cry. I mean, just seeing, it was tears of joy, it wasn't pain. And I would come out of those envisioning sessions, I would come out of the closet and I didn't feel the same as I did when I walked in there, because my current physical reality didn't seem real to me anymore, because I was already living the other life. And so that's the technique that I used to escape the hold that Dad had on me. Really, that's the technique that I used to get myself out of the hole. And that was all about living on purpose, because I would script out what I wanted my life to look like, and then I would take my, what I wrote down into the closet and then put it into action. And so that's when I really started living on purpose, because the things that would come to me in my visions would guide my behaviors throughout the day. And that joy that I felt in those sessions, I carried that with me throughout the day. And that helped me to be kinder and more compassionate and less critical. And those great qualities, those innate qualities that I was born with, of being a very kind, generous person who really wanted to give people things and help people started coming to the surface, and I finally started acting on it instead of acting like some asshole, you know. And so that's how it's all connected. You make the decision, you communicate what you want, you strive for excellence. You don't think about the outcome because you trust your silent partner over here's got your back, you know. And so that's what living on purpose is all about, and that's how it's connected to the law of attraction and metaphysics and quantum physics. And the science is there, you know. And I never doubted it, you know. It made sense to me more than anything I ever had. You know, that's why I just dove into it. Religion never made sense. Conforming never made sense, but that made sense. You know, that made sense to me. And I was able to try and figure out why things were the way they were, and it just all made sense. And so I've never looked back, you know.
Oh, that's amazing. I thought about a lot as you were saying that too. One thing, there's a quote that I like a lot, and it's by Neville Goddard, and he says, I'm pretty sure, but you can't plant orange seeds and expect apple trees to grow.
Right.
So I feel that's kind of what you were talking about. Like, I don't know why my life is like this.
Right.
It's like, I don't know. You planted the wrong seed, I guess.
Oh my God.
But I also just like that you had like written everything out, and you were taking this time to really envision it. And since you had taken that time and you could see it, it's almost like, you know, your imagination really started to create a reality, and that's literally what came into being. And it's also interesting how it started affecting the way that you moved through the world even before things showed up, just because there was like this confidence of knowing like, well, I've already seen what's gonna happen.
Yeah, I was relieved.
Yeah, well, it's like when you have a vacation plan. So like if you know you have a vacation in 3 weeks, like you're not as worried. You're like, whatever. Like, you know, so people go to work and like their coworker might be getting on their nerves and like, whatever. Like, I'm leaving in 2 weeks. This is fine. So that's really awesome. I like that quite a bit. Even talking about the quantum field, that's a whole thing that I could get into. But
oh yeah.
Let's see here. Oh, so then with that, could you give me a concrete example of time in your life before you started living on the living on purpose lifestyle, and maybe even how you felt like you were manifesting what you were experiencing prior to awakening?
So I made some notes about that question, and it's an important question, and so I don't want to forget anything.
Because it's kind of like you were saying with, not to like insert, but it's just something that like I hear a lot, especially like in interpersonal relationships. But your example of saying like every man cheats, and then it's like being like, why are all of my boyfriends cheating on me?
Right, and okay, and so all right, will you say that question to me again? Because there's something that I do not want to miss here.
Oh, absolutely. Read it. Let's see here. Have you ever had that type of tea? It literally tastes like a Fruit Loop roll-up. That's insane. Could you give me a concrete example of a time in your life before your awakening and living on purpose, of where you felt like you manifested something that you were experiencing?
Okay,
like,
so
even if it wasn't directly like conscious of you, like feeling like you did it on purpose, but like, you know.
So looking back, I know without a shadow of a doubt that I manifested all of the people that I dated, okay? And they were all very, very different, but the abuse was similar. And each person had like a different way of abusing you, okay? And every single strategy that they had, I experienced it in childhood. And so looking back, I know without a shadow of a doubt that I manifested all of those relationships and everything that came along with it. And I would, just like you said, I mean, I would start out in a relationship and say, well, there's no need in getting attached to this one because I know he'll cheat. Well, sure enough, that's exactly what happened.
Right.
You know, so that's a pretty solid, concrete example. So is the interstitial cystitis. You know, that's another concrete example. You know, because it's going to show up in, you know, tangible forms and non-tangible forms, and so those are two really good concrete examples of manifesting something that I wasn't aware that I was doing it. And then once I started living on purpose, well, I mean, every single thing about my life is one big manifestation story. Like the first real manifestation that came to fruition was the start of my financial independence from Dad. And because I was, you know, doing the inner work and practicing forgiveness and seeing things through a different lens, I was able to, again, possess more compassion for him. Like I didn't necessarily want to hurt him anymore or get revenge. And so when I was in the floor of my closet creating miracles, because that's exactly what I did, I saw this scene, like you talked about, you know, the scene work. I saw this scene, and it was how I really wanted it to go with giving him his car back. Like I was constantly threatening to take that car. I mean, it was constant, and I needed it. I was in college. I needed it. And so I saw myself going and buying a car, although I didn't have money to buy a car at that time. I didn't have any money. I didn't have a job and nothing. And so, but I brainwashed myself and saw myself buying the car and it all going very smoothly. I didn't focus on a type of car. I just focused on a car that was new and that I liked, okay? And I saw myself taking his car and returning it to him at his office, walking in the door, handing him the keys, and thanking him for allowing me to use his car, okay? And I felt so strong and powerful and confident and relieved when I would play that out in my mind, that I conjured up all of those emotions that were going to go along with that day. And so that all happened. The only thing that didn't come into play was he happened to not be at his office the day that I returned the car. And so, and I thought about that. And so I prepared a thank you note and I gave that to his secretary. And I mean, he had, you know, trash talked me so bad around that office that she was shocked that I had done that. And I had such a good attitude about it. Yeah, I wasn't crying, scared. Paula, where's Dad? Oh, you know, I walked in there confidently, just as I had envisioned, and I told her what I was there to do, and she said, well, you know, your dad's not here. I said, that's okay. He doesn't have to be. Here's the keys to his car. It's parked out front. Give this to him, please. Thank you. And I just turned around and walked out. And I mean, I felt like as confident as I ever had in my entire life. And I bought that car without a job. It was crazy. And so I was hooked at that moment. I mean, I was hooked. And that's when I knew that I could create anything I wanted. That was my proof. You know, that was my evidence right there. Yeah.
How do you like keep the faith? I hear that a lot when I hear about people like trying to learn how to manifest. Is a lot of people kind of lose faith halfway through.
Oh yeah, that happens. It's documenting the evidence.
I was gonna say I got that email today, and I'll talk about that when we bring up your 30-day challenge. But I wanted to mention that that's something that I've done a lot this past year, and it's really helped. Even like the small things, or even things that I've noticed are like the birds before land, where I'm like, it's cooking.
Right.
So that's great. I had another thing, but we'll just have to. It'll come up.
It'll come up.
Is there any other things you'd like to talk about that you've manifested, or?
I have manifested. I've manifested everything. Everything.
I remember what I was going to say.
Oh, go for it.
I was going to say, and because I remember watching your videos, that was something I had meant to mention. Is I had actually started watching your videos before I knew who you were, which I told you about. But for like 3 or 4 months before I actually met you, but the whole time our trainer had been saying, "Yeah, meet this girl." I'm like, "Yeah." Because anyway,
That's awesome.
But I'd heard you talk a lot about, and it's something that I always like hearing people's answers, but like blocks. And how certain people will have different blocks in different areas of their lives. So someone might be really fortunate, like you said, like in money, or even in love. Like there's some people who are abundant in love, have a friend, have a great relationship, but they're like, I couldn't make $1 to save my life.
Right.
Or vice versa. And so I guess my question would be, how do you deal with blocks, both with yourself, and what would you recommend to other people who are experiencing that?
So I was not able to completely ditch the blocks until I started meditating. And meditation, in my opinion, it's critical. Like it's the backbone of living on purpose and making the law of attraction work for you. That's how I release any blocks, period. And the way that I can notice if I am blocked to something, it's the way that I feel. It's like, okay, if I find myself trying to complete a project and it starts to feel like work and it starts to feel like a taxing endeavor, then I know I'm blocked, something's not right. And so I will set the intention to release that block before I meditate. And so I read an intention list, and that intention list, changes year by year. But I'll read an intention list before I go into my meditation, and those blocks will stay at bay. And that's how I clean out the trash can. I meditate twice daily, and I've used transcendental meditation since 2017, and then since I'm going to be teaching primordial sound meditation, I figured, well, I should probably start using it. And so I've been using that meditation since February, twice daily. And so that meditation, you release stress and toxins from going from activity to silence twice a day. You just integrate that into your daily life. So you're releasing all that crap twice a day. And so that's how that I clear out blocks. And frankly, I don't think I would be able to do it if I didn't meditate. But that's just me. That doesn't apply to just everybody. But I believe in meditation so strong. I think that it is as imperative in my life as breathing.
Nervous system regulating. I will not recommend it enough. That's the first thing I send clients is a list of nervous system regulating techniques.
Yes.
There's 2 questions that I have. One of them, they're both kind of related, but I want to say both so that I make sure that I'm saying it so it doesn't skedaddle out of my brain. But the first one is kind of ties in with the blocks, is like learning how to decide, because I hear that a lot, like just decide that it's yours, and giving yourself that permission. And even kind of what you said, like when you have realized you're out of that like receiving or allowing or flow state, you're like, oof, there's a block, which I like that that you had kind of brought that up, is like when flow is broken, you're like, there's a block that's coming up, and I think that that's marvelous, honestly. But like how to learn how to decide. But my other question was, I am a huge fan of birds before land, or like seeing like evidence sometimes. It's not completely necessarily sometimes, because there's some things that I'm so detached to that I'm like, it'll come around.
Yeah.
But I am curious, what is like, if you have one of your craziest like manifesting stories where like the trail of events was either just so like serendipitous, or like wow, or just so weird that it was just like, how did we even get here? So yeah,
It was meeting my husband, hands down. And that
he's
man,
lovely, by the way.
oh, he is, again, like everything is the total opposite of what it used to be. Will is the total opposite from any man that had ever been in my life, period. He does not have a mean, abusive bone in his body. And it's like, I knew that, instinctively knew that. The moment I met him, I knew he was different. So that manifestation started when I was 26 years old. And I was clueless at 26. But I met this guy named David, who we were both political science majors. Don't ask me why I was a political science major. But so I met him in class, and David was not a person that I would typically have been drawn to, because we were so opposite. But I walked into class that day. It was the first day of class. It was a politics of sex class. And I saw David sitting we had these tables, and 2 people could sit at each table. And I saw David sitting at a table, and there were plenty of empty tables sitting around, but I chose to go sit by him. It's just one of those things. I'm gonna go sit by him. Typically, I would sit by myself close to the door, you know. But I went over and I sat down beside David, and he and I started talking, and we have not left each other's side since. Like, we've been friends since that day, okay? And so David was with me through a lot of, you know, that bullshit, you know, chaotic time, and he was there, you know, during the spiritual transformation, and although he doesn't understand it.
You're cool. You keep doing it.
Yeah, you know. And so he and I never really talked about it a whole lot, but what we did talk about, we talked about my abusive relationships. And David's one of the first people that I told. I said, you know what? I am not going to get involved with any other men until it's seriously a knight in shining armor. Like, seriously. I'm not doing it. I am done. David's answer was like everyone else's. Well, that's not possible. Where are you going to find him here? You know, and he'd laugh. And I'm like, I'll find him. It will happen. I'm not going to look. But he'll surface. And if he doesn't, that's okay too. I'm not getting involved with anybody else until that person comes along. Well, I didn't know this, but Will was David's boss at a car dealership in Richmond, because Will's whole family's in the car business, and he grew up here in Prospect. But they had sent him to Louisville to run Richmond Honda. Okay, or they had sent him, I don't know what I just said, they sent him from Louisville to Richmond, Kentucky, where I lived, to run a car dealership. And I didn't have a clue who Will was. And so David calls me up one day, and I was at work. I was 35. And he said, I've got somebody I want you to meet. I said, David, no. The answer's no. I'm not doing it. I'm not interested. I'm not doing it. He said, I know this man really, really well. He's my boss. I said, I am not going out with Sam Swope. I said, that man's got to be 90 years old. David said, it's not Sam. It's his nephew, and he's younger than you. And I was like, what? And he said, yeah. I said, I'm not doing it. I said, don't give him my number. I'm not doing it. 5 minutes later, I get a text. This is Will Swope. So what David did was he told Will that I was interested in him and told me that Will was interested in me. He told me that Will had seen some pictures of me on Facebook or something.
Parent trapped you.
Right. And so I got that text, and I don't know what came over me, but I remember the feeling. And something just said, Paula, you need to be nice to this person. Like, that was like just ding, you know? And so I went against everything that I thought I wanted to do, and I answered the text. And we ended up meeting, I think maybe the next day, and we never parted. And so, and when I met him, it was kind of, you talk about weird. Everything that I had put on a vision board that I made in like 2009, and at that point it was 2013, it came along with him. Everything, right down to the ring. And I had never really even looked at engagement rings or looked at wedding gowns because I didn't care anything about getting married. I mean, I'd gone through my parents' divorce, and I'd never been married, but felt like I'd been divorced, if that makes any sense, because that divorce was so brutal. And so it wasn't my thing. But when I was making that vision board, I thought, well, you know what, I should probably put some legitimacy to this, and I'll pick out a ring. And so I found a ring I thought was pretty, and I stuck it on my vision board. That's it.
So you're just doing it for the hee-hees.
Yeah. And that's it. And I never showed Will a ring or anything.
Have you ever saw the board?
No. No. And so everything on that vision board, I had it by 2015. But it's like the universe is like so perfect in the way that things transpire and come to fruition, because I had to be matched with him in order for a lot of that stuff to unfold. And so together, he and I were such a good energetic match that we were able to make a lot of my dreams come true and his. I mean, as cheesy as that sounds,
It's not
you know.
cheesy.
But I knew that he was the one that I had been, you know, that had been living in my reality up here. I knew he was the one because I immediately trusted him and felt comfortable around him, and that was not me. You know, that was not me. But I immediately had that feeling, that comforting feeling, within the first 10 minutes of being around him. And so that manifestation was like a slow burn. But when I started being deliberate about it, and I started, you know, getting specific and demanding what I wanted, he showed up.
Yeah, that's something I was gonna, like, how did you, I guess, like, two things, like, decide on it, like, be like, no, because, like, that is something that I hear a lot, and that's something I'm glad you brought it up, is a lot of people, you know, when it comes to manifesting, are like, you're not being realistic, which is, like, that's kind of the point.
Yeah, just kind of throw logic out the window.
But it's people, whether it's with jobs, like, well, you're not going to be able to find a job that pays you that much, and you're never going to get a husband who's, you know, or a partner, whatever, who's handsome, nice, and treats you right, and you all make good money together. Like, you got to pick a couple, you know, you're being too picky. So how are you able to not only, and the last part of that was, and get over your own scripts of your past, and allow yourself to be like, I am deserving of this, I know it's possible to find this, and I know I will. And how, But how did you get over your own limitations and the limitations that other people try to set for us?
I took some powerful actions, like to communicate loud and clear what I wanted to the universe. And the first thing was forgiving myself. I mean, that was the first thing, because for me to attract in someone like Will, I wouldn't have attracted him in when I was 25, because we would have had nothing in common. I mean, I would not have been a match for him at all. And so the people around me were a direct reflection of who I was. And so I had to get rid of those people. I mean, forgiving myself, forgiving the people that I harbored resentment towards the most, helped me to feel more deserving of a partner like that was on my vision board and living up here. A supportive person. I had never had anybody that was really, really supportive, and I wanted that so badly, and I knew that I needed that so badly. I knew I needed that. I never had anybody to support me or really truly believe in me. I just didn't. Everybody was always against what I wanted to do and very quick to say, you can't do that, you can't do that, you can't do that. So I had to convince myself. I stopped trying to convince all of those people, and I convinced myself. And so when I convinced myself that I was as deserving of love and happiness as anybody else, I got it. But it took me longer, I think, than most people, because we're all different. Maybe it took me longer than most people to get to that point. When I got to that point, I ended the toxic relationship that I had been in on and off for about 8 years. And this man was a textbook narcissist. And so narcissists are not on every corner. They're not. Thank God they're not. But when you're raised by one, you migrate towards that. And so I have been fortunate enough to care about 2 narcissists. So this man, I had been involved with for a very long time, and the relationship was incredibly abusive on a whole other level. Like, he wasn't physically abusive, he wasn't verbally abusive. I don't think that man ever really said one thing to me that was derogatory. But silent treatment, that was damaging. His silent treatment, it was awful. And he was, oh my God, notoriously unfaithful. And so I was hanging on to that relationship. That was blocking me from anything really great. And so when I got to the point that I believed in myself and I believed that I did deserve what I really wanted, I ended that relationship and I never looked back. And I did that in December of 2012, and I met Will July 3rd of 2013. So it's
6 months.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is relatively short after you get out of
once you get out of the smoke and the fog. Once you come out of that, then things kind of go whoosh. And I experienced the most powerful episode of synchronicity that I had ever experienced at that time. And it was about 1 week before I met Will. And I was driving to work, and I never listened to the radio on my morning commute, ever. I just was silent and thought about things, and and a song popped into my head for no apparent reason. It's not a song I liked or a song that I had heard, and it was Happiness, was Lubbock, Texas, in my rearview mirror. That's the song that popped in my head. didn't think anything about it. Just like
Okay, yeah.
turned on the radio. It was just something I never did. It was on the radio. I was blown away to the point that I almost had to pull my car over on the side of the road. And then I looked at the clock and it was 8:11, which was a number sequence that had been following me around. And so I knew that something huge was coming at that point. And I met him a week later. So that is a big, huge manifestation story. It's huge. So
there's a lot of layers to it too. Like even you
Oh,
just
yeah.
saying like meeting, who was it? David?
my friend David,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm surprised I remembered his name.
Yeah.
When you were 24?
26 is when I met David.
So I mean, even that whole trajectory was like, what, 8 years?
Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Of like kind of like the seed of that.
Yeah.
That is wild to me.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, seriously.
And it's just like people will come along for a reason. They will come along for a reason, and messages are communicated to us through other people.
Mm.
And I started paying attention to the things that would catch my attention. And here's another piece of this. It was, I think, about probably a year. I think it was like the summer of 2012 maybe, and I ran across Body Talk. Have you ever done Body Talk?
Where you talk to a specific part of yourself, like your body? Or?
Well, you've got a Body Talk specialist, and your body will tell them certain things, like where you need to release trauma.
A little bit. I don't know if I've heard it exactly called that, but maybe something similar, or it might be the same thing, but yeah, somewhat. But I would love to know what it is.
Well, and I've only done it one time, and that was the summer of 2012, and I haven't heard a lot about Body Talk since, but myofascial release, I do that, and that's kind of similar. But anyway, I heard about Body Talk, and I was just, doing everything I could at that point to, heal myself. I would try anything, basically, And I found this lady, and her name was Molly Yunker. And I saw that she was in Prospect, Kentucky. And I was like, where's Prospect, Kentucky? And so I said, oh, well, that's Louisville. Okay. She's, close enough to me. So I call her up, make an appointment, and I come up here. She was in the office complex over there.
Norton?
By Kroger, right over here on Timber Ridge. She was in one of those buildings. And I got to Prospect. I'd never been to Prospect before. Got to Prospect a little bit too early and killed time driving around in this subdivision.
This one?
Yes.
I love that so much.
And I don't think it was like, no, it was fully developed back here, because I saw Sutherland from the highway, and I thought to myself, now that is the spot I would like to live in. And so I drove back in here just to kill time and looked around at all these houses, and I just opened my mind up to the possibility that was a possibility. When Will brought me up here to meet his parents, I like to have shit a brick. When he got off the Snyder at exit 37 into Prospect and headed up this way, because they lived right over there. And I was like, oh my God. And I didn't say anything to him, but I was sitting over in the passenger side seat dying, because I was like, oh my God. So you got to pay attention to what catches your attention. And the fact that, I've driven by a lot of beautiful homes in my day, but I never pulled in and took a look and felt drawn to it.
Right.
And it stuck with me. And then when we came up here, I was like, oh my God. So it was just a string of miraculous events.
The one thing that popped in my head, and that's amazing, is when you would envision this like life for yourself or these things that you want, how did you not put this pressure of like time? So say that it's kind of like, I can see the benefit, the best way that I can think of like a metaphor, because Kentucky, is like some people benefit from this, some people don't, where if your goal is like, I'm gonna manifest like losing weight by like, or envision it, and so they'll get like an outfit that's like 2 sizes smaller and it'll motivate them, but other people would see that as pressure. So how do you not put this pressure, like if you, like maybe you do something like that where you do book like a concert for your friends to go to, even though like you either haven't made these friends or you haven't even asked them yet if they're gonna go, or you do, you buy that website for your company, but you don't know, if it's gonna work out.
Yeah, that's tricky business, and each of us have to do what feels comfortable to us in these situations. And so I'll just tell you how I deal with the time factor. So you really cannot get wrapped up in the timing, because it's all about choices. And so every choice you make leads to what your future is going to look like. And so if you want to know what your future is going to look like, then, take inventory of your most dominant thoughts, words, and actions now. And then you will see, that gives you a good indicator. So with me, the time factor is what I got frustrated with the most when I first started on this journey, because I was very, very, very impatient. And then Wayne Dyer comes along and says, infinite patience produces immediate results. And when I heard that, I thought, what the hell does he mean by this? And I was watching him on PBS, and I'd stop it and rewind it, and stop it and rewind it. What the hell does he mean by this? And it took a while for me to understand that. And so if you live in faith and an inner knowing that thing is coming, just like you said about the vacation. You got vacation in 3 weeks. You don't have any doubts that you're going on that vacation. You're going to be a relief, and you know that. And so if you can approach everything with that type of inner knowing, you kind of forget about the time. And I learned to, and this goes back again to documenting the evidence, because I look back, and any time that I felt frustrated because something hadn't happened, everything that was going on was leading to it. Even though, I didn't know what was going on behind closed doors. And so I just keep all of that in mind, and it will keep you from getting frustrated.
Kitchen has to keep its secrets.
Yeah. And so it's like, you take the actions, you make the choices that reflect this outcome that you want. Just go on and take action. Just clueless, just throw logic to the wind. Set up that website for your business. Write that check for yourself. Just don't worry about when it's coming or how. Just do what you need to do, to make it happen. And that has worked for me time and time and time again. And when you can live moment to moment and not even think about 10 minutes from now, it will keep you calmer and more confident and way more grounded. Now, it took a long time for me to master that one. And I'm not, I shouldn't say I'm a master at it. I'm a lot better at it than I used to be. Because we all get thrown curveballs. We all get thrown, curveballs. It's just how you react to those curveballs. And I don't fall apart anymore. I don't second guess my capabilities. I don't second guess that something isn't coming. I've just been thrown a curveball. And that could be a test. It could be a warning too. And so when I get thrown a curveball, I'm just mindfully aware. I keep my eye on the prize, and I just keep moving forward. And I don't think that I've heard Gabby Bernstein say this a lot, and I agree with her on this. I love her. we don't ask for help enough.
No, I don't think a lot of people do.
It's like it doesn't even occur to us to ask for help. And so in this day and time, I don't hesitate to ask for help. If I'm in a situation that I don't know what to do, then I don't need to do anything. And I will just say, okay, universe, show me what you got. You know, you've knocked my socks off before, let's do it again. You know, I'm doing my part, you do your part, show me what you got. You know, I will and not make any, you know, knee-jerk decisions, you know, in that moment. And that's just all part of getting to a place that you're really, really grounded. It's just like that ridiculous voicemail. I didn't even want to pick up that phone and retaliate. I didn't even want to. And so that's another benefit of living moment to moment and grounding yourself and not worrying about what the future holds, not worrying about time, just being infinitely patient. And then you get the immediate result, because once it shows up, it doesn't feel like any time has really passed. It's there. You're in a new world. Ooh, you know, be careful what you wish for. You'll get it.
Yeah, I'd heard like Abraham Hicks once talk about like you want to be enjoying the present moment so much, and not like in a sense of like resisting it, but that you're almost like you almost don't want the thing that you've been asking for because you're so happy right now. And I also hear a lot, you know, like it's not so much that you want that thing you're asking for, you want what it's going to give you, the feeling it's going to give you. And if you can sit in that, that's even kind of what you were talking about with meeting your husband, is like you had to start giving yourself that love and that support, and you were already sitting in that feeling when you met him. And that's actually something I tell like my clients, and I've been practicing myself, is when I talk about other people, I've stopped saying things like, oh, you make me so happy, this makes me so happy.
Right.
I've been saying, you are such a great addition to my happiness.
There you go.
And that has made such a huge difference. Even just with my mind, I'm like, oh, they are just adding to it. And that's not like saying like, oh, well, I've, you know, lessened your value now, Paula, because you only add to my happiness. It's like, no, that's beautiful. Like,
Yeah, it's a source of happiness.
Right.
Yeah.
So, oh, yes. One thing that I was going to ask, and I know I've kind of gotten off topic, but
Sure.
it's what would you say, because this kind of goes into like one of the questions I have about like people who might be like skeptics, or how would they get into it, but I want to know when it comes to like manifesting or law of attraction for you, one, like what are your morals and like values around that? Because I know, especially since manifesting has become such a hot trending topic, and some of it's not necessarily, and I'll leave that to you, but people have their different ways of practicing it. But also, with that being said, how do you still navigate and appreciate and honor the human experience while also recognizing that like you can't cry over every time you spill the milk? Like there's a moment for grief and like disappointment, but there has to be a cutoff at some point. So how do you get into law of attraction or manifesting your spirituality without like getting into this spiritual bypassing so much that you're completely trying to avoid the human experience?
That is a great question. So
I threw you that one. I didn't put that on the paper.
It's a great question. So I'll start with the first part about the ethics around it. So my personal belief is we can manifest whatever we want as long as it's not causing harm to another person. I also believe that in order to be, we're all master manifestors, but in order to manifest what we want, I think we have to be very selfish. Now, my definition, and this ties into morals and ethics, because the traditional definition of selfish has a real, negative connotation. I mean, people really don't like these so-called selfish people. But my definition of selfish is not the traditional definition. It's doing what's right for us. It's doing what we want to do. If we don't do that, then we end up hurting other people anyway. Because if we deny ourselves of what we need, then we can't help anybody else. And so it is not selfish to say no to anything that makes you miserable. And that is a lesson that I had to learn. If you make yourself miserable consistently to please somebody else, that behavior will backfire. And I learned that the hard way. And so part of my ethical, code with manifestation is to put yourself first. And if you do, you're going to be a better friend. You're going to be a better spouse, girlfriend, boyfriend, employee, business owner. It's going to unfold, and every facet of life if you put yourself first, because you got to feel good to manifest the good.
You can't give anything you don't got.
Right. And so, and again, we are what we think we are. And so the second part of your question was how you go about this and not avoid the human experience, right? Okay. So positive thinking is something that makes me want to run my fingernails down a freaking chalkboard. Okay? Because when you are upset and you are mad, you need to honor that. Because if you bury it, you're screwed. You need to honor that.
You just planted a seed.
Right. And so if somebody during those moments when you're, upset, you're grieving, looks at you and says, you got to think positively about this. That is not how this works. It's not how this works at all. Okay. And so I have never, ever forced positive thinking. That is toxic positivity. If somebody you love passes away and you are grieving and you miss them, you are not in a spot to think positively about that situation. And so what I did, I never avoided any of the, human experience. I mean, I started embracing all of it. But what I did do, again, goes back to strengthening my emotional intelligence for the sake of being more emotionally resilient. And so when I'll say in this day and time, I might stay mad for 24 hours, not 24 years. And so when you do the inner work and you use your spiritual tools every day to interrupt bad thoughts or bad emotions that make you feel terrible, you're interrupting them. You're not avoiding them. You're switching gears, kind of.
You're not putting a specific narrative to them.
Right. You're aware that those don't define who you are. You're not your thoughts. You're just the thinker of those thoughts. You're not your actions. You're not any of that. What we really are, we are, infinite beings with tons of possibilities. And so that I started being able to think that way when I reached a higher level of consciousness, and I did that through meditation. Again, I did it all through meditation. So I didn't necessarily avoid the human experience at all. I just improved it. And so when things would happen to me, the curveballs, the bad things, I dealt with it better to where it didn't cause me to go on a downward spiral. Like back in the day, I would get one little bitty ounce of news, that I perceived as bad, and bam, there, me and my Calvin Kleins would throw them heels on, and I was out the door, and within 30 minutes, I was sitting at the bar doing shots, and I was talking about it, and that spiraled into drunk phone calls, drunk texts, bad decisions, a hangover that resembled a 101-year-old with the coronavirus for a week. I mean, this would go on, and then I would wallow in those low energy emotions for so many days, then something stupid would happen, and then that something stupid would turn into a legit problem. And so, again, my way didn't work. And so when I started approaching things in a manner that I was just more managing my emotions more effectively, then I wasn't avoiding anymore. It's like I was improving. And so it's just like when that voicemail came in the other day. That was a test, and I passed it because I did not come unglued. I didn't think about it before I went to bed. I didn't think about it when I woke up the next morning. And that's always been a real test for me. If I wake up in the morning and I think about something and it eats at me and bothers me, then I've got some cleaning up to do.
Oh, I love everything that you just said. And I guess it makes me think because, that was something that I was really worried about. And honestly, probably something that held me back from my own, spiritual healing and, helping myself grow was I was worried other people would think that I switched up. Kind of like what you were talking about earlier.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that even from what you were saying, it's like, one, you kind of learn where to give your energy in the sense of is this something that I want to be upset about? Because I think as I get older too, I realize I don't think the energy is limited, but I think my energy is very precious, and I would rather use it on something that can be beneficial, even if it is sadness. Not that I have to be productive, but it's the way that I view harder emotions like anger or sadness is I'm how can I sit in this emotion in an empowering way while also honoring my grief and discomfort without and I think the biggest thing that changed and kind of what you were saying is you've improved it because it's the stories that I tell myself are different now. So when I get angry or sad, from the outside it might seem like I'm completely calm because I think I am calmer. It's just I'm acknowledging that because I'm angry or sad or grieving or even being resentful in a moment, even if it's briefly, that I'm just a human and that there's not this narrative of I'm a bad person.
Right.
Or the world's bad. It's just more of well, this is an emotion that I'm going to have to feel for 5 minutes and then...
Yeah. And I will also ask myself, is this going to matter? Is this really going to matter next week? Or is this going to matter 5 years from now? Does this really matter? And when I started asking myself those questions and just starting that inner dialogue for me was an awakening because I never even questioned anything before. I would just I'm on autopilot, just out here doing all this stupid shit, And so now, I'll ask myself that, like you said, so this is how I'm feeling right now, and that's all right.
Well, yeah, what's this mean? It makes me think of that Rumi quote, and I can't remember exactly what it is, but basically, and we've all heard some form of it, which is make everything in your life, make it into something that's working out in your favor. And just in the way, heard this a couple ways, but in the way that you can look at something completely going out of your favor, even the smallest thing, somebody cut me off in traffic, the rest of my day sucks.
Yeah.
You can also see that you can flip it on its head, and even in some of the worst situations, I've seen people grieve horrendous things where I'm how are you getting through?
Oh, I know.
And they're still sad, they're grieving, and they're
won't let it go.
And they literally mean it when they say maybe they are in a better place. They were suffering a really long time, and I'm good for you, because at a time I could not understand it. I was how are you standing right now?
Right.
But I love that, being able, because someone had said the same thing when it came to imagination, and I wanted to bring that up with your meditation exercises you did, and that really changed my life, as they said, and now I tell my clients this is, if you can imagine all the bad things that can happen to you, you need to give the same, you need to at least start by giving the same amount of airtime to all the things that could happen that are going forward.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's, because it's almost weird, because if I were to tell you, this obviously isn't the case, but if I would say, I just know my boyfriend's going to cheat on me, and then he's going to do this, and he's going to do this, and some people would think that that's normal. Now, you probably wouldn't, because you'd be like, ooh, that doesn't sound like a good way to live, but you do you. But I feel like in society, a lot of people see that as normal. But if I start telling normal people, well, I don't know, that sounds condescending. But
no, I know what you mean, though.
But people who haven't really started a spiritual journey, I'm gonna start, because I did tell people, like, I'm gonna start a business, I'm gonna be a coach, I'm gonna do this, and a lot of people were like, why don't you just go and be a therapist? Why don't you just do this? Well, you know, like, that just sounds stupid. Like, you're gonna do it? Like, I used to party with you, like, things like that. Why is it, you know, it's just funny to me that there's such a distinct difference in how much people will allow you to sit in this pitying imagination, but like when it's like, I could do, the world is my oyster.
Right.
But at any rate, I'm doing the thing. What? Oh, so people from all around the world are participating in your 30-day manifestation challenge, including myself. Which I was gonna say, I've loved the emails, because even today, it was either today or yesterday, so it's funny you mentioned that, was make sure that you're writing down like proof of everything that's happening. So a lot of the times when I open your emails, even though, because you had told me, like, you probably know a lot of this, but it's been helpful, because it's almost like a reminder of, like, almost from the universe. It's like, hey, just a reminder, you know, like, I've loved that. And you have a community group, and that's really cool to have like-minded people as well, because like you had said earlier, and I completely agree, when you first get into something like this, it can be very isolating, or you can feel like nobody else thinks this way.
Oh yeah.
And it's strange, because the more you go down like the route of getting to know yourself and being authentic and expanding your spirituality, like, people start just flocking into your life. Like, anyway, but would you be able to talk more in depth about your 30-day manifesting challenge and what people do over those 30 days?
Oh yeah, so I created the manifestation challenge in January of 2022. And it was one of the first actual services that I created for the business that I started in May of 2021. And so I created it with, you know, young Paula in mind. And I thought, you know, and I thought back to being in that closet and everything that happened. And I thought, how could I package this in a way that people have support, because I had no support. How can I package this in a way that a child could understand it? You know, for people like me who didn't know about the law of attraction, you get thrown in with Wayne Dyer, and you're not going to be able to follow that cat.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. And I mean, he made me, he made me way more intelligent, like in every way possible. And so, but I had a hard time following Wayne in the beginning. And then I started studying Abraham Hicks and went, oh my God. And it took me I so did not understand Abraham Hicks that I put the book down and didn't come back to it for years.
It's the next level.
Oh my God. Deepak Chopra, okay. Genius, okay. That will intimidate people. That will intimidate a lot of people. That level of intellect, it leads some people to believe, and I don't mean to sound condescending here, I was that person. I'm just very determined and learned. But it was so over my head when I first started studying all of that I was very intimidated. I didn't think that I was going to be able to even figure out what they were talking about. And so I kept that in mind, and I thought, how can I break this down so simple that anybody, regardless of what their past looks like, or if they have mental health issues, or whatever age they are, whatever their situation is, how can I break this down so that it will, if it doesn't, let's put it this way, if it doesn't help somebody, it won't hurt them, right? I mean, just give it a shot. If it's not your thing, okay, no harm done, you know. And so I kept those things in mind, and that's how I designed that first challenge. And I launched it as with a small cohort of people, and they went through it, and I used their feedback to go in and improve it. And so, I mean, it's for the beginner, or maybe for a person who has lost their way and just needs to ease, their way back in, because it has cadence. It starts out slow, but it builds and builds and builds, and all the concepts are hidden in there. I just don't use the fancy language that Wayne Dyer uses and that Deepak uses, you know. And so it is truly, I made it easy. You know, I just made it as easy as I could. And science shows it takes about 30 days to form a habit. So that's why I set it at 30 days. And so each day, people get an email, day 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, that goes on for 30 days. And each day they get a spiritual lesson. And it's not date oriented, so people can go at their own pace. They can stop, start, go back, redo it, you know, however they want to do it. Once they pay the $37 registration fee, then that's, you know, theirs to keep. Plus they get lifetime access to everything that goes on in the group, which is organized into a private Facebook group. And so that's where our, you know, alumni, I mean, the people that have been through the challenge mentor the newbies, you know, so you got the mentor-mentee thing in there. That's highly effective. I used to design mentoring programs when I worked at Eastern Kentucky University.
That's amazing.
And at Berea College. And so I firmly believe in mentoring, and so I added that component in there. And then there's manifestation buddies sitting there waiting. If you ever want to have those mock phone calls, or
That's amazing.
you know, and so I just clumped all of that, you know, into one. And then I bring in guest speakers who can help people heal trauma, like Rebecca Lyons and Danielle Massey, and doing the shadow work. And so you get a lot of bang for your buck. Like, I wanted to remove any barrier to participation that anybody could possibly come against, whether that be emotional, financial, learning curve. You don't have to be anywhere physically. You can do it all virtually. And so I removed every barrier there is to participating. And that's made it a lot easier for people too. Now, I have not even started really, I haven't promoted the challenge. I haven't promoted it at all. Like, and most of the people in there came from TikTok. Like, TikTok has been a saving grace for me. And I really, really hope that it's like, it sticks around, because it's just been a community of people that have been very friendly and open and welcoming. And so everybody in that group pretty much, you know, came from TikTok, except for a handful. And so I'll start promoting it at some point. So that's the 30-day challenge. And then I'm in the middle of designing a 7-day challenge that will be ready pretty soon. And it's more advanced. I mean, it's way more advanced, and it's rooted in the spiritual laws, and it's a fast-paced 7-day thing, but it's not day-oriented either. You know, you can go at your own pace, and it's just like some of the lessons in the 30-day challenge, it might take you more than a day. You might want to spend a week on something, and I think the longer you spend on those lessons, the better.
You digest it.
Yeah. And so the 7-day challenge was, you know, designed just like the 30 days, same concept, same everything, same setup, just more advanced. You're digging deeper, you're taking way more action. And so I'm calling it, it's based on my theory about being a thought snob. And that comes from what my family said to me about my nose being stuck so far up in the air. And so I turned, you know, like a thought snob into being a good thing versus something that people are, you know, like, ugh, kind of like that selfish word.
Right.
And so it's based on that concept. And you're taking a whole lot of action, and you're learning a whole lot in a pretty short period of time. But for somebody that's either been through the 30-day challenge already, or, I mean, like you, I mean, you've already got so much knowledge about all of this, you would fly through it without probably any problems at all.
I still got a lot from the 30 days. I mean, genuinely.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm so glad to hear you say that, because if I would have had that simple little 30-day challenge when I was 29, I mean, I would have been clueless about what I was doing. but I would have skipped over a lot of the learning curve. I mean, some of that was just so over my head, and now I understand all of it, but it took a long time. And so I wanted to make it easier for people so that they weren't discouraged to just say, forget this, I can't do this. Can't do it. And man, it goes back to, you know what I say, you don't have to be Mother Teresa to create miracles. You don't have to be perfect. You can smoke, drink, cuss, have bad habits. I mean, you can still do it. It's just the miraculous thing is when you start living this lifestyle, those bad habits subside. And so it just naturally, they just, solutions to problems naturally emerge. And so, but if I would have had something just packaged like that, it would have been easier. It would have just been easier. So that's how I designed it. And I've loved it. I've loved it. The group is so much fun. And you don't have a bunch of haters, and you've got somebody, if you've got a crazy manifestation story, you can tell it in that group, and we're going to be like, yes, instead of thinking she's nuts, because some people think we're nuts. And so, but nobody in that group is like that, because we all have the same goal, and it's just, we just want to be better. That's it.
I like that you touched base too on the fact that people so often quit, or they think they quit manifesting, because you never really stop. You never really stop, but you just are intentional about it or not. And I can relate to that, just because there were several years leading up to me finally committing, which is right around kind of when you did in your lifetime, which was about a year ago for me. And but I was in this teeter, like you said, this duality of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I want to commit to it, but it just seems overwhelming. And it would be, because I'd listen to these people talking about some next level stuff that is so far beyond my comprehension, that it just almost sounded like spiritual mumbo jumbo garbage. I was like, what does this even mean? But I agree. I do think it's very cohesive in bite-sized chunks enough to where you can read your email, kind of process it through the day, and then you can put it away for the day, and it's not just here's all the answers to the universe now. Right.
That's it. And like I said, I craved a better life, and just didn't want to be miserable, so badly. And my way hadn't worked is the only reason that I finished that first book of Wayne Dyer's. And I have, any book I've ever read of Wayne Dyer's, which I think is all of them, I've had to go back and read those, 2 or 3 times to fully understand what he's talking about. And with any of the metaphysics giants, that's the way it is. We're gonna have to break because he has got to go potty, and he won't shut up until he goes.
Okay, so the title of your book is Law of Attraction for Sinners: Havoc to Happiness, Your Complete Guide to Manifesting Miracles, which I love the title, by the way. Where does the title come from?
So I started trying to think of a way to describe my spiritual journey, and I came up with havoc to happiness. And so that's where that piece of it came in. The law of attraction for sinners came from those labels, sinners and saints. And it goes back to, what I said before, you don't have to be Mother Teresa to create miracles. And so in the book, I talk about, what society labels a sinner as and what society labels a saint as. And, I'm here to tell you that the universe is an equal opportunity employer. It's it doesn't matter what you've done. It just flat out does not matter. It doesn't matter if you're a sinner. It doesn't matter if you're a saint. Nobody's a saint. And so I just kind of break it down like that to give people confidence right off the bat that this is for them. Because I've heard people say, well, I've got too many bad habits. I've screwed too many people over in the past to even think about, doing this, and I'm just, I'm just not going to do anything. And so I just ripped the Band-Aid off in the beginning and say, hey, yeah, you can, because this used to be me, and now this is me, and 1,000 other people like me have the same story. We're all sinners, So I just kind of throw those just historical stereotypes out the door. So that's where that title comes from. Now, I have pulled the plug on that book. And I've decided to not pursue a publishing path for this book with this title. So I have given it I rewrote it, gave it a trendy makeover, and gave it a title that's more marketable in today's publishing world, because major publishers are not looking for books with law of attraction in a title, because the market is saturated with those. And so the new version of the book has a lot of the same material, but it's just written in a way and given a title that is catering to the hoops of fire that you've got to jump through these days to get published.
Right.
And so I'm in the process of querying agents. And so I've got it's a self-help spiritual memoir is its classification. And so I've got that book. And then I wrote a book it's a children's book called Dolores Crosses the Rainbow Bridge. And that book is about the law of attraction. But I don't say that, and it's a picture book, and so it's for kids, between like the ages of 4 to 8, and so there's a lot of messages like embedded in that book, because if somebody would have told me about the law of attraction, say maybe when I was in kindergarten, I would have been way more advanced than I was. And so I firmly believe that teachers need to start teaching this in elementary school. I really do. And so I kind of killed two birds with one stone with that book. I wrote about, the love from dogs, the unconditional love you get from dogs. And then there's a hope to see them again. And then in all of that is the law of attraction. And so I'm seeking professional representation for those two books. So yesterday I actually released chapter 1 from Law of Attraction for Sinners on Instagram.
Right.
And so, and I haven't had, time to really check my social media, but I think it was getting a lot of play. I think a lot of people read it. And so I love to, get the feedback from my writing. So that's the deal with the books. I've just made a really long story short.
I'm excited to hear about it. I'll have to check it out. Which brings me to my next question, next and final. What motivated you to become a spiritual guide, and what are you currently working on?
So, what motivated me was watching other people struggle for no reason. It's like through my whole spiritual journey and through meditation and everything, I've figured out my dharma, and my life purpose is to help people transform their lives the way that I have. And so that was my number one motivator, because I am convinced that if, let's just say, the Appalachian region in the United States of America, it continuously just lags behind the rest of the world. People stay in poverty, they never escape it. There's these deep poverty pockets, there's chronic health issues. It's just plagued by all of these horrible things, and the pattern never gets interrupted. And it's like insanity, because they keep trying to solve these problems with programs and grants and policies and all this stuff, and none of it ever works. You never see any change, and that's clearly reflected in the census data. I mean, you can take a look at America and look at the whole world census data and look at the Appalachian region, And it's like, what the hell is going on there? It's the mindset. And so, and I know that. And if everybody in that region could start living on purpose, I'm convinced that in 5 years, that data would look way better. It would not paint such a dismal picture of the future. And so that was another motivation for doing what I'm doing, because I know the answer. You know, I mean, I've lived it, and it's like, it's right there in front of your face. And so that's what motivated me to do what I'm doing. So, and it's never felt like work to me, ever. Like, I can do this day in and day out, and it never ever feels like work. Even on the most challenging days, you know, querying agents and trying to find a major publisher when you're brand new and your last name's not Kardashian or Kennedy. You come across a lot of challenges, and you got to have thick skin, because you're going to get some pretty harsh criticism and feedback, and you just, you know, you got to hang in there. And so through all of that, I've still been motivated to, you know, do what I'm doing. So, and that's, I mean, ultimately helping people. And it trickles down. I mean, you know, it trickles down to like a much bigger picture. It's like Deepak Chopra started the Chopra Center because he's convinced that we can accomplish world peace if we have 1 billion people using primordial sound meditation. I agree with him. I absolutely agree with him, because I know what it's done for me. And if I can make these changes, anybody can do it. They just need somebody to show them how to do it. So that is what motivated me. Yeah.
I love all that.
And so what I'm working on currently, so I'm working on my certification at the Chopra Center, and the full certification will be done in December of 2023. And so everything that comes along with that adds to all the services I'm currently providing. So I'm working on that, and then right now I'm focusing on my certification in primordial sound meditation, and that'll be done somewhere around the end of this month or May 2023. So just a few more weeks. So that, and then I mean, I've got so many books up here, but I've still got to, you know, wrap up the one that I want to get published. So I'm kind of I'm working on a whole lot of stuff, but those are the main things. And then wrapping up the 7-day challenge. Yeah.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to ask you whenever we stop this about the primordial meditation and all that. But where can people find you on your Instagram, TikTok, your website, all your socials? So
the best place to go would be to my website at paulaswope.com, and then all of my social media stuff is right there. So it's just like a one-stop shop. So I'm pretty easy to find. I'm very active on Instagram and TikTok, more so than the other social media sites. And Instagram finally gave me the blue badge. I'm like, okay.
Ooh,
yeah.
Okay.
Like, all right.
Moving up.
Right.
Didn't know I was in the presence of a celebrity.
Yeah, that was tough to get.
I
Like,
bet.
you have to legit really prove yourself, and it's
well
an
deserved.
ordeal. Oh my gosh, it has been the social media piece of all of this. I have loved it, but you really have to be on your toes.
Yeah.
It's no
I
joke.
think you're doing great at it, though.
Well,
honestly.
thank you.
Seriously,
I mean-
and you're really consistent. I mean, I see you every time on my timeline.
Oh, well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't watch a whole lot.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Because I've had a lot of people recently comment and say, hey, you're back on my FYP, because the algorithm will
Oh, yeah.
kill you in a minute. You know, so, and I'm learning, you know, that's another piece of this new business. I'm learning, you know, so many things in social media. I know more about social media right now than I ever thought I would,
Yeah.
or ever wanted to.
Same.
Yeah. Yeah.
This has been an absolute joy.
Oh, good. I loved it.
Yeah, the time flew by. So I'm just going to be a Midwestern and walk out of the door kind of way, in the sense of, I don't know, there's no wrap, so we can just
All right.
stop recording. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. This was great, and you're good at this.
Thank you.